What's going on today, YouTubers? Welcome to another edition of Walking Reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at a custom knife by a really somebody who's been getting more and more popular lately, Enrique Pena, who is mostly a traditional knife maker, or at least he used to be primarily a traditional knife maker, but has made the transition into modern, I guess you could call them tactical knives. I just call them EDC style knives. But he's gotten into doing like the flippers and stuff like that, as opposed to just the the traditionals. So one thing that I think you could probably pick up any Enrique Pena knife and you'd probably get the same feeling that I have, which is this guy's probably a perfectionist. He he just does not seem to leave any room for error in any of his knives. It's just incredibly well finished and well done. The detail everywhere is it's pretty much perfect. So well, let's get into the specs of the knife before I get ahead of myself. Blade length is 3 1/8 inches long, of CPM 154. It is obviously a Swayback, or I guess you could call it Wharncliffe style blade. Basically it's just all straight cutting edge and a really nice gentle arc on the spine of the blade, almost like a reverse drop point. It is a flat grind. Was that a flat? It's really hard to see. Yeah, I think that's a flat grind. It looks like a flat grind from about 3/4 of the way down. Not super thick blade stock, but for the size of knife that it is, it's pretty generous blade stock. But it comes down to an absolute crazy thin laser edge that he put on there. His knives, especially like in the secondary market, they can start to get that crazy price tag, but you can tell that Enrique wants his knives and intends his knives to be used. A lot of times custom makers, they know that people want to collect their knives and they don't really ever bother giving it much of an edge, but Enrique put a screaming edge on here. It is insanely sharp. Yeah, you could shave your face and not feel any real discomfort using this knife. It does have a very nice hand rub satin finish with really no flaws. You can see it's just an absolutely uniform from tip to tail here. It is just completely perfect. It's all uniform. There's no curvature to it. It's just perfectly straight. Same on the locking side. As you can see, the only writing on the blade is just Enrique Pena's maker's mark, which is basically just his last name. Really nice sharpening choil. It's extremely sharp all the way to that choil, so the entire blade is intended to be used. So this blade style I find the most useful in my day-to-day life. It's incredibly useful for opening packages, slicing stuff in the kitchen, that kind of thing. Drop point would be my normal go-to, just for kind of like the utility of it, or the versatility of it. But this one, for 99% of the stuff that I'm doing in my day, this is probably the most useful blade shape. It just tears through boxes. It's got a thin enough edge that you can use it to open mail very easily. Like I said, really good in the kitchen. So yeah, you have a lot of control over the being able to put your finger so far up on the spine. God damn, that focus is really pissing me off. It keeps wanting to unfocus, and maybe I'm too close. So yeah, 3 1/8 inch on the blade. Overall length is 7.5 inches, so the handles are just over 4.5. It's the season for bugs. Essentially, this knife is basically a frame lock. You would call it a bolster lock, basically, because of the way that the scales are set up. But it's one continuous piece of titanium, sort of a bead blasted titanium, and then he's obviously milled out portions to put the carbon fiber overlay. And then your lockup is, I mean, you could pretty much take off the carbon fiber and the knife would still function. So in my mind, that's basically a frame lock, but technically it's called a bolster lock. The carbon fiber is amazing. He textured it. You can't really see it on camera, but there's subtle texturing to it. It's not polish. It's not a high polish, but you still have the shimmer of high polished carbon fiber without the smoothness of it. So really nice for tactility. You can feel that in your fingers, the texturing on the carbon fiber. All of the hardware has been anodized blue. The titanium hardware has been anodized blue. The pocket clip, obviously, you can see here is a gorgeous piece of, I guess that's Timascus or Mocha tie. I don't know what the difference is between the two. I never really cared to look it up. And then there's this gear pattern back spacer, which is also anodized blue. You can tell he's a perfectionist because the anodizing on every piece of hardware is exactly the same. There's no different shades of blue. It's all the exact same shade of blue. There's no like changing of color as it came out of the anodizing process. He's got everything exactly uniform. The junctions where the carbon fiber and the titanium meet are completely seamless. You can't feel them at all, except for obviously here where the bolster lock is. But you cannot feel the transition between the materials. And that's at a 90-degree angle. That's not dovetailed. That's not easy to do. The weight on this knife is just under 4 ounces, about 3.8 ounces. So relatively lightweight. The flipping action is very crisp. It's not really a fall shut. If you take away that lock bar tension, it does fall shut, but it's not really, it's got a strong enough detent and strong enough lock bar pressure to get extremely good lockup. I would have no problem putting this knife to harder use than I do. It's got incredibly solid lockup. Like I said, relatively generous blade stock and pretty thick handle scales as well. Pretty thick titanium handle scales as well. So I would have no issues putting this to harder work than I do. It does run on caged bearings and ceramic detent. The action is just so smooth and incredibly snappy. I love that flipper tab. It's like a big fat. You can't not get traction on the flipper tab. You can do the light switch if you want. You can kind of just do the pull down, or you can just push it in, push button. It flips every which way. You really can't not get it to flip. Even with my thumb, which I can't usually open knives with my thumb, it's very easy to flip with my thumb. No lock stick at all, even on as strong as the lock bar tension is. The pocket clip is really easy in and out of the pocket with just enough tension so that it's never going to go anywhere that you don't want it to. Just overall, you know, he took a pattern. This is obviously a traditional pattern, the swayback jack. You can see the sweeping tail here in the handle, and then obviously that continuous line through the blade, and then, you know, obviously your flat cutting edge. So he took a traditional pattern and turned it into something more modern, and something that probably more people I know there are still a ton of people that collect traditionals, so I don't want to like marginalize people that carry traditionals, but personally I don't think I ever would. It serves nearly the same purpose, except you usually never get a pocket clip with a traditional. But you don't get this. You don't get that fun, you know, hey, I'm going to use my knife. Oh, yes, I get to flip it open. Like that's the fun part. It's basically like they took the utility of knives and decided to turn them into something to fidget with. And I love it. You know, I absolutely love it. And he did such an amazing job of making this look utilitarian, but also like classy. And, you know, it is a little bit, I mean, it's eye-catching. That the lines are really graceful. Yeah, ergonomically, this is meant to be carried. This part isn't meant to be in your palm. It looks like it would be uncomfortable, because that's kind of like pointed there. This part is meant to be like on the meat of your palm, and you're supposed to use the knife like this, or just pinch. So this is probably not the model I would suggest for everybody. Even though I think it's incredibly useful, I would probably suggest people go with the more traditional, like he's got a Barlow flipper, he's got a clip, like a Lanny's clip flipper. He has his more modern models, but he also has these throwback, like traditional and modern blend knives, which are some of my favorite. They're a really good size for EDC. They're incredibly well built, and yeah, just it's fun to be able to carry something that an old timer might recognize, but obviously with something new attached to it. So yeah, like I said, prices on the secondary market can get a little nuts. I paid just under $1,000 for this knife, which, I mean, that's, you know, a whole bunch of money. But we're talking about a custom knife made by an absolute master and perfectionist, who takes the materials and then, you know, he's using high-end materials, obviously, but his workmanship and his craftsmanship actually elevates the materials above what they were to start with. There are guys out there who will make a custom knife with just anything you can find on, you know, a knife supply website. They'll get a slab of carbon fiber, they'll get a block of blade steel, they'll get some titanium, and then they'll use their tools in the shop and then, you know, slap it together, and that's a knife. And that's fine, but the ability to take the material and elevate it above its base state, I know that sounds kind of corny, but that's what Enrique Pena does. The knife is more than the sum of its parts when he puts his craftsmanship to it. And I mean, just, I'll give you guys without me talking, I'll let you guys just kind of look at the knife. Every transition, I'm not supposed to talk. I mean, just, it's absolutely gorgeous. Alright guys, that's about it for this video. Do please remember to enter my custom knife giveaway. It's an incredible piece by a gentleman named Anton out of South Africa. So do check that video out and enter if you haven't already. Alright guys, take it easy.